Okay, so now we look at the combined controlling water amounts and getting rid of wastes. Those wastes are nitrogen containing, right? When you break down things like amino acids, the amine part forms ammonia, and then in some animals, that ammonia is then converted to one of these two things. And there is some mention in the syllabus, as we'll see, of your maybe knowing that, and in fact in IB, a little more specifically knowing that. So here we go with that a little bit. I'm going to skip this because I've incorporated them into each PowerPoint slide, but here it is for you to look at all at once if you want to do that. These again are the higher level IB syllabus things to know about this stuff. This we already saw this, so I'm going to skip that also. But these also, if you find kidneys in polar bears and kidneys in you, that suggests common ancestry. That is a IB AP, very, very important kind of syllabus thing. So here we have again the IB syllabuses, which I'm gonna skip because I've incorporated them all. Except just to note that again, if you see something in red type here, that's also an IB need to know. Okay, so here, like here's where I've incorporated them. The type of nitrogenous waste in animals is correlated with evolutionary history and habitat, and that simply means this: if you live in the water, this initial form of breakdown of proteins, that's ammonia, it's very toxic. You can't handle a very high concentration of it. But since you live in the water, it's kind of handy because you can just allow this ammonia to diffuse out of your cells, most of your gill cells, because the rest of you is covered with layers of slimy skin and scales that are impermeable to water, right? Most of the water is coming in and out via your gills and you're swallowing it. This ammonia, as it builds up, can just diffuse out of cells and you don't have to worry about converting it to something else. But if you're a land living thing, which includes most mammals, like it says, most amphibians, yada yada, um, you can't let ammonia build up too much. And so what you've evolved to be able to do is some chemistry that converts it to urea. Now that costs you some energy, but urea is not nearly as toxic as ammonia. That's why it can build up in concentration in your cells to a much higher degree than ammonia before you have to get rid of it, but eventually you have to get rid of it. And again, you have to get rid of it dissolved in water, and that's why you're also going to lose some water when you get rid of it. And it's your kidneys that filter all this stuff out and control that, as we'll get to. If you're a bird or an insect, many reptiles, land snails, you're not going to need to be that specific, but it might help if you remember birds and insects. And the reptiles, if you remember, birds are really reptiles, right? And this should be kind of familiar to you. When a seagull poops on your windshield, or God forbid on your head, right? What's coming out is not only food that it didn't digest, right? But also this stuff. They combine in that little bird poop, they combine their getting rid of nitrogen waste in the form of uric acid. Uric acid can be much higher concentrated and not cause a problem than urea even, and it doesn't have to be dissolved in water. So it comes out in all that pasty bird poop, right? How is this advantageous to a bird? Well, birds fly, most of them anyway, so do insects. So carrying around the excess water that it takes to dissolve urea in would be a disadvantage. So the evolutionary process has resulted in birds converting ammonia to a different kind of thing, which is much lighter because they didn't have to be dissolved in water, and they can fly with a bunch of it and poop it out. So that would be answering this, and they weren't specific about the three types of nitrogenous waste, right? But that's all they can be telling you to know. And again, if you remember what kind of animals have this kind of waste, that they might ask you this and just fill in the blank form like they always threaten to. Okay, so we are going to focus on urea, right? This is why, again, we have evolved to convert ammonia into urea. That's done in the liver. Liver cells do all kinds of chemistry. And then again, the kidneys are going to be the ones that secrete that urea out so that it doesn't get to too high a concentration to disrupt chemistry, because it is a basic kind of chemical. So its disruption would be due to pH change, which is another thing you could work into a question in a story about this. Okay, so this is what we just said about uric acid in birds and reptiles, insects, so I'm going to skip that. So here is the basics, the general basics, and these general basics usually get you most of your points if you're asked a general straight out question, which IB often does, very just to spit out the content, describe the steps in kidneys filtering out nitrogenous waste and keeping enough water in to water regulate. Those steps, number 4. First, like I said, filtering out is kind of a key process here. Your kidney is like a filter. What's it filtering stuff out of? Your blood, or maybe it depends on what kind of animal you are. Maybe these tissues, these liquid tissues, but they all are kind of like blood, and we'll focus on blood, right? That filtering out is crude, and that's a word that's commonly used. What's meant by that is both good and bad stuff get filtered out. So that kind of has required, so to speak, set the stage for the evolution of processes that can take back the good stuff, reabsorb. Reabsorb means back into the body instead of being on its way out. Bring this stuff back into the body. And then along the way, right, let's secrete some more bad stuff into it. What is it here? This fluid that's on its way out, which we're also going to refer to with the word filtrate, right? Because anything that you filter out can be called filtrate. And then once you've finished exchanging the good and the bad stuff, and you have mostly bad stuff in this filtrate, then you got to get rid of it. And that's excrete is the word for that, since this stuff you're sending out of yourself not to do some good for you in some other way outside of your body, but just to get rid of it because it's waste. That's called excretion. On the flip side of the coin, a secretion is something like sweat. You sent this water out of your body, but you did it so that outside of your body it can do you some good. That kind of stuff, tears, sweat, those would be called secretions. Oil in your skin. So that's the difference between secrete and excrete. Okay, so here it is graphically, but here very importantly, we have in this, not graphically, but figure-wise, model-wise, we have included the fact that this fluid is going in and out of tubes, 2 kinds of tubes. Those kind of tubes we call blood system tubes, and the ones that have thin enough walls that let things get in and out are capillaries, right? And then this tube that's part of your blood system, in this case your kidneys are filled with these tubes. Your kidneys are really a big mass of tubes, and this filtration involves stuff coming out of your blood into these kidney tubes. These kidney tubes we're going to call nephrons. Neph is the kidney word. A nephrologist is someone who specializes in kidney stuff, right? And then that filtrate, again, has good and bad stuff in it. And so some of the good stuff is going to get reabsorbed back into your bloodstream. Because here's the way to look at this. What's in your bloodstream is kind of like part of you. But what's in these tubes is really on its way out, because all these tubes are connected to that tube that leads out of you. So anything that's in this tube is really on its way out. And if it's good stuff, we've evolved ways to take some of that good stuff back. But then again, we've also evolved, and all of this is about active transport and passive transport stuff, so we'll get to that. We've also evolved to take some bad stuff out of your blood at a place other than up here, which we're going to name all this up here in a minute, right? And that would be called secretion, right? And now the excretion part is to take all that stuff out. This might seem to you a little counter to the definition I just gave of secretion, and it is kind of, to be honest, because this stuff is being put back into these kidney tubes so that it can be taken out. So that's more like excretion by typical definition, but this is what this is always called. This second chance to get bad stuff out of your blood, filtration being the first chance. So we got to live with that term. Okay, so they throw this in here for whatever reason. In the IB syllabus, they also want you to say that insects have evolved a very similar system, but different in its evolutionary history, therefore convergent evolution, right? These tubules, same kind of idea, tubes that eventually are going to lead to the outside of the insect, are named after a guy, Malpighian. That's why they're called Malpighian tubules, right? And the kidney tubes and these Malpighian tubules are, again, the same kind of thing. They're analogous structures. Remember that word, right? The convergent evolutionary process results in analogous structures, structures that do the same function, but they don't have the same evolutionary origin. You can see in here some insect anatomy that when we get to a little bit of that in IB land, we'll come back to this. They don't have a very extensive blood system. They have a heart. I'll draw it over here. That heart pumps blood into arteries, but then those arteries just end and the blood kind of spills out, and we don't call it blood, we call it hemolymph, but it's the same idea. It just doesn't have red blood cells in it, right? And so this spills stuff all over all the cells of an insect and brings them nutrients and takes away waste. So it serves the same function as your circulatory system. It's just sloppier. So when these fluids bump into these tubes, with the help again of active transport pumps and passive transport channels and things, then we have this filtration going on that results in the waste products, here of which in an insect is often uric acid again, like we said, right? And the waste products here are funneled into the digestive tract, unlike you and I. Your kidney tubes and your digestive tubes never connect with each other. So this is why in an insect, both undigested food, feces, and this filtered fluid, call it urine, right? They all get plopped out of the same opening, which is still called the anus at the end of the digestive tract.